Today we're continuing our sermon series on living resistance and doing two related to work. So that today is related to work and next Sunday is going to also be related to work. And we're starting the first of those two with Sabbath and Sabbath rest. And I want to give a significant portion of the sermon time today to lifting up and amplifying the work of an author named Tricia Hersey. Tricia Hersey. Her website introduces her this way. Tricia's craft is deeply influenced by her experience as the daughter of an abolitionist pastor, as a native of the South Side of Chicago, as a torchbearer of her family's Mississippi and Louisiana roots. Her upbringing is woven throughout her 2 decades of experience as a teaching artist, chaplain, poet, theater maker, performance artist, and community organizer. She necessarily dissolves these boundaries to unlock mental, physical, and spiritual spaces for radical thought and imagination. The wideness of her practice opens portals and possibilities of world building and future casting, while embodying the teachings of somatics, womanism, womanist theology, Black liberation theology, Afrofuturism, and her ancestors. She also has a bachelor's of public health and a Master's of Divinity from Chandler School of Theology. And her most popular book is called Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. And she is sometimes known as the Nap Bishop. But before we get to her words, I just want to make one point about the text itself. The point about the text is this. The first full day that human beings were alive, according to Genesis 1, was dedicated to rest. As you know from last week's reading, according to Genesis 1, God took 6 days to create everything: stars, sun, moon, sky, sea, land, all living things, all the things. And then on the 7th day, from what we just read, God rested. So from God's perspective, the 7th day is a day of rest after a lot of hard work. But that's not human beings' perspective. Human beings woke up or were created in the middle of day 6 of creation. They were told, be fertile, multiply, fill the earth, walk upon it, and take care of it. They were told what to have for dinner, plants, and then they went to bed, as far as we know. So their first full awake day of existence was the 7th day, which was just rest. That's significant because it means that their first day was dedicated simply to imitating God, who was resting. They didn't rest because they were tired, in other words. They hadn't done any work yet. They rested because God was resting. It was deeply connected to their experience of divinity. So now let's hear some words from Hersey. She says some things that are very universal and some things that are specifically directed to people who have been marginalized, which is, I think, one of her strengths. But we're going to put the quotes up so we have some time to kind of ruminate over them. This is a couple that are more universal. You were not just born to center your entire existence on work and labor. You were born to heal, to grow, to be of service to yourself and community, to practice, to experiment, to create, to have space, to dream, and to connect. Not just our entire existence is not about work and our labor. Let's see the next slide. Loving ourselves and each other deepens our disruption of the dominant systems. They want us unwell, fearful, exhausted, and without deep self-love because we are easier to manipulate when we are distracted by what is not real or true. I think there's a great connection there between our church's mission and vision statement, that bit about disrupting dominant systems. It talks about in our mission statement that we want to be, as a congregation, disrupting injustice in the world. So there's this beautiful connection with, because sometimes people feel like that phrase in our mission statement is a little bit nihilistic, like we want to tear something down, but what are we putting in its place? But the idea is that, in fact, as we are the church, as we love one another and love ourselves and love God, we are disrupting the domination systems in the process of that love. So we are creating what we are as we are tearing down, if we're doing it correctly. Now here are a couple more quotes, and these speak more to people who have experienced marginalization. So, America is not a welcoming place to all bodies. America was built on the backs of Black and Indigenous people who labored without rest for centuries as the country has built its economic power. White supremacy became a vehicle to poison the hearts and minds of an entire nation to view human beings as less than divine. Rest is resistance because it is a counter-narrative to the script of capitalism and white supremacy for all people. Rest is a counter-narrative to capitalism. Next slide. For Black people who are descendants of enslaved Africans via the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery, consider the fact that your ancestors built this entire nation for free with their stolen labor. Use this knowledge to tap into what we have already done, so you don't have to grind yourself into oblivion now. Okay. So I think one of her strengths is this ability to express both the universal nature of rest and the fact that rest is experienced differently by different people. She really helps us to see the complexity and nuance of the concept of rest and Sabbath keeping. So those of us who have never had our labor stolen or been cheated or had to grind ourselves to make ends meet, we need rest too. That's clear. But we also might think about ways that we can give of ourselves to those who maybe need rest more right now. Those who struggle under the uneven burden capitalism places on some people but not others. When I was a while back in Baltimore, I had a chance to volunteer at a festival that really drove home some of these principles. It was called the Vegan Soul Fest, and it was put on by the Afro-Vegan Society. And so it was a wonderful festival, thousands of people, but it was really directed on lifting up vegan diets and healthy diets for Black people. And so the festival had wonderful music by Black artists and lots of Black-owned businesses that were there at the fair and tabling, and also lots of great vegan food. And it was wonderful. And they asked for volunteers, and I was like, I'll volunteer for that, to be of service to that festival. Let me know what you want me to do, I'll do anything. And so they put me on garbage duty. And I had this experience of walking around with thousands of Black people, having a fantastic time, listening to great music, having great food, enjoying being with each other. And I was walking around as one of the few white people pulling trash. And not only that, but it was a very sort of eco-friendly organizing team. And so they then had us take the trash back and sort it to take out compost and recycling. So we had gloves on, but we were digging through all this trash. And it was just this profound experience for me, not because I feel like I've sort of paid any kind of debt or anything by doing it, but because it was such a reversal of my usual experience. Because I've been to plenty of festivals where most of the people are white, and maybe there are a few people of color, and some of those are pulling the trash. And to experience that reversal in a way where I got to do labor for people who maybe often had experienced more labor than I had, and had done more labor than I had in their life and in their history. It was just a moment of self-realization. And I hope that if you ever get the chance to put yourself in a kind of role reversal when it comes to the power systems of our society, that you take that opportunity. So one more point, and then we'll go to a couple more quotes from Hersey. This idea of rest as resistance, especially as resistance to capitalism, has some beautiful overlaps with other ways that we can withdraw our cooperation from the oppressive systems of our day. Practices like strikes and slowdowns, both tools of resistance. In a strike, we all know, people stop working. They say, we're not gonna give our labor to this system anymore. It's broken. We are gonna stop working. We're gonna strike. You're not necessarily gonna rest in a strike, but we're gonna withdraw our labor. In a slowdown, those are for situations where our livelihood and our safety depends on that we need to continue to comply with the authorities. but we don't have to comply well, right? We can go slow, we can make mistakes, we can feign ignorance and incompetence, just enough to disrupt the system without triggering a response from the oppressor against us. The Danish people did this very successfully during the German occupation. And it still happens today, sometimes spontaneously. If a laborer is being mistreated, they're not going to give their best work. They might be doing things that are not honoring the person who's mistreating them. So, in other words, this idea of rest has these three different levels. It's a divine right for all people. It's a right that's been denied to some more than others. And it's an act of non-cooperation with systems of oppression and exploitation. So here are two more quotes from Hersey from Rest is Resistance. The Rest is Resistance framework also does not believe in the toxic idea that we are resting to recharge and rejuvenate so that we can be prepared to give more output to capitalism. What we have internalized as productivity has been informed by a capitalist, ableist, patriarchal system. Our drive and obsession to always be in a state of productivity leads us to a path of exhaustion, guilt, and shame. We falsely believe we are not doing enough and that we must always be guiding our lives toward more labor. The distinction that must be repeated as many times as necessary is this: we are not resting to be productive. We are resting simply because it is our divine right to do so. And then the next quote, last one. Productivity should not look like exhaustion. The concept of laziness is a tool of the oppressor. A large part of your unraveling from capitalism will include becoming less attached to the idea of productivity and more committed to the idea of rest as a portal to just be. Think about all of the groups that have been called lazy throughout history. And then think about laziness as a tool of the oppressor. So with that, I'm going to invite you to rest now. We're going to take 4 minutes, because 5 minutes is just too much. But 4 minutes is going to feel pretty long. And you're invited to now just use that time to rest and to experience that in your body. You don't have to think because you're in a church that means you have to pray or meditate. But what does it feel like just to sit and rest? What's that like in your body? What's that like in your mind and in your heart? And that will be the end of our time, our sermon. So let us begin to rest.